here it is.
17.
Is that 17?
Yeah, that's 17, right?
Yeah, that's 17.
Let's go! Oh! Why couldn't that be on camera?
It is.
Oh, it is on camera! Let's go!
Alright, Mango, let's get into the basics of how to play Lorcana. So we're going to start with just an overview of the cards, then we're going to actually break down the parts of a card, then we're going to get up how to set up and play your first game of Lorcana, and then right before we actually get to the example game, we're going to go over some of the more special mechanics and abilities that cards can have that come up very commonly in play. So let's get right into it. Lorcana, 6 colors.
All right.
Magic has 5 colors. There's 6 colors in Lorcana. Let's see if you can get the names right off the top of your head, Mango. Ready? Blue?
Oh, I was going to say blue.
That's
Sapphire.
Sapphire.
Yeah.
Green?
Yeah, emerald.
Emerald.
Ruby.
Ruby.
Amber.
Amber.
Amethyst and steel.
Very good.
All right.
Very good. All right. All right. So there's 6 colors. A deck can only have a maximum of 2 colors.
Okay.
Now, you could just run 1 color, but there's no real advantage to it. All the ink, how you pay for resources, works for any color, so there's really no reason to just run 1. But you can't go over 2. So aside from the colors, there's 3 main card types. We have items, we have characters, and we have actions. So both items and creatures stay in play when you play them.
Okay.
Actions just resolve immediately, so they do what they say they're going to do, and then they go to your discard pile. All right. So also there can be subtypes when we see here in this line where you have item and you have your characters and actions. So items, I don't believe there's any subtypes right now. Characters here we see with Jumba Jukaba, we have Dreamborn, Alien, and Ventor. And with Rafiki, we have Dreamborn, Mentor, Sorcerer. Now those can have some effects. For instance, there's a card type or a character type called a broom that you'll see another character will reference, hey, brooms cost less. For instance, Mickey.
Okay.
The Sorcerer Mickey makes brooms cost less. So sometimes it's just flavor. Sometimes it can have special Zenergies or other cards care about what type it is. Actions, there's at the moment only 1 special subtype of action in that song, and we'll get into that later in those special abilities.
All right.
So those are the colors. Those are the card types. Now we're going to get into actually breaking down the parts of the card. All right, Mango, let's get right into it. Let's work from the top to the bottom.
Right.
Starting at the very top, we have the cost of the card. So this one only costs 1 resource. That means you need to tap 1 ink in your inkwell or exert 1 ink in your inkwell in order to play the card. This one would cost 5, so you'd have to have 5 unexerted ink resources to tap in order to play this character, Jumba Jukaba. Now notice that these cost numbers have this wreath around them, the ink wreath, and these cards do not have an ink wreath. So what that means is that cards with the wreath can be played face down in your inkwell as a resource.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead and flip that over. So once you play a card face down as a resource, it completely ceases to be the card that it was.
Right.
It can't then be played anymore.
It's just
now,
ink of any color.
correct. It's ink of any color, basically. You can use to play any card, and that's all it is. So naturally, cards that have the ability to be inked are much more versatile than cards that can only be cast, right? Because if these are in your hand and you wish you had an ink, you can't play them down as an ink. So ink cards are very versatile. That's part of the balance of the game. All right, so next we have simply the name. Then we have the color and the characteristics or the type that we've gone over previously. Then we have the rules text, which contains the actions and abilities of a card. And then we have some fun flavor text at the bottom. This one's from Flynn Rider. Important part of any game is the flavor of the game, especially Disney's Lorcana, where you're building your own story. You're building the lore of your story. That's how you win.
Right. That's the whole game.
That's the whole game.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. And then here at the bottom, we have the rarity and some artist and like some card number information just about the set. So the rarities in this game, there's 5 rarities. So we have common, is this circle. The book is uncommon. What's this one?
Just a triangle, I guess.
That's just a rare. The rare is kind of bronze.
Yeah.
Then we have the silver super rare, which is
Yeah.
kind of a little bit like a fleur de lis.
Is there a gold?
There is a gold, actually. It is the legendary Stitch here. We see it's like a gold shield or something, so
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. It's a 7 cost, and it's inkable. This is a very good card that we'll go over more later. So that's what all the cards are going to have in common. However, Characters have a couple more things that we need to go over that's very important to the game. The first one let's talk about is the strength and the willpower. So you can see the strength is the first one, and it's got kind of like a little spiky thing around it, right?
Yep.
That's showing that it's the attack number during a challenge. And the willpower is a shield. So that's how much damage you can take before you become banished.
Right.
So in Lorcana, when you play a character, you're basically sketching it. So you are the artist, you're telling the story, you're trying to gain lore in order to win. The first player to 20 lore wins, and we'll go over that here in a second as well. But when characters challenge each other, they get banished from the story. So they're no longer in the story, they get put in the discard pile. So a character can only take as much damage as its willpower is. And damage in this game, like for instance, in Magic, damage is not persistent. So at the end of every turn, the damage kind of goes away. In Lorcana and other games like Hearthstone, damage is persistent. So it's important to track the damage on the actual character card, either using little counters, which you'll see when we're doing the example game, or I like using little 1d6s because it's very, you don't have to move a bunch of stuff. You just turn a die in order to count how much damage is on it. All right, so aside from challenging, there's another very important thing that characters can do, and that is quest for lore. So here on the side, we see these little lore pips. So Jumba Jukaba has 2 lore pips. Rafiki has 1 lore pip. So characters actually have 2 hidden activated abilities that you can use every turn, and they both require that character to exert. So one of them is to challenge. That's how you exert, and the other is to go on a quest in order to build lore, and that's how you win. So the first player to 20 lore counters, so 20 total of these pips on characters had been exerted over the course of the game, that's how you win. Right when someone hits 20, the game ends, that player wins. So again, you can exert to challenge, or you could exert to quest and gain the lore equal to the pips. Now the really cool thing, kind of the magic that makes Lorcana work, is you cannot challenge characters unless they're exerted. So a character, your opponent's character, has to be exerted in order for you to challenge it. Which means that on their previous turn, they likely either had to quest themselves or challenge something else theirself.
Oh, okay.
See, so that's kind of how the whole tempo of the game works. That's how you can kind of control your vulnerabilities, how you can press the tempo on one of their characters that's maybe very good at questing, while your character is very good at challenging. So that's kind of the magic of the whole game works, is making those decisions. Questing versus challenging both require exerting, but again, you can only challenge opponents' characters that are exerted.
Alrighty.
Alright, Mango, now we've gone over the overview, we've gone over the parts of the card, so the next thing you do is finally learn how to actually play.
Yes!
Just so happen to have a pretty competitive deck here. This is a Steel Amber deck that we'll be using as our example deck, probably against a Ruby Emerald deck. We'll see what we get when we open some packs to build. So, alright, so this is a 60 card deck, so constructed decks in Lorcana are 60 cards. Minimum. I believe you can probably go over, most card games allow, but generally you want to stick to the minimum if possible to reduce variance. Alright, so in limited, 40 cards. We'll talk about limited later. I'm not going to focus on that right now. So I strongly recommend sleeving your deck, as you see here. And when you sleeve your decks, it's very important to make sure that all the cards are facing in the correct direction, and they're all sleeved in the same direction. So in this case, I have the sleeve openings at the top of each card. So then when I shuffle my deck, it's important to stab the bottoms, which are the closed side, into the bottoms of the other side. So you hold it kind of loosely in your hand and just stab the bottoms into the bottoms and then push it down with your thumb. So you see, this is very similar to like riffle shuffling or ripple shuffling, depending on what you call it. You're getting
It's easy enough.
a really good mix of cards there, and you're keeping your cards safe, and you're also trying to not damage your sleeves. That's why you're stabbing the bottoms into the bottoms there. So then right when both players are done shuffling, you'll set down your deck, usually present it to your opponent so they can cut. You know, in casual games, you're not worried about your opponent cheating, but if you're playing in a tournament, it's always good to allow your opponent an opportunity to cut your deck, and then at high levels of play, you even want to shuffle your opponent's deck, but that's for another time. So the next step to do after you have shuffled and presented your deck is to roll to see who goes first. Or you can flip a coin. There's any random method to determine the starting player,
I'll roll
right?
higher than you.
You're going to roll higher than me? All right. So I like using 2d6s. That's kind of a Magic player thing. So let's see. I got, 8 the hard way. That's pretty good.
Okay.
Yep.
It's okay. I'll get.
You're gonna get
11.
Well,
Here
let
it
it fly.
is.
9. Wow, that's some one-upsmanship if I've ever seen it.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm 0 and 1 in Lorcana now.
Yes.
All right, so both players start with 0 lore, naturally. The whole point is to go to 20 lore. So you could start with a dice. You could have a lore tracker, but I strongly recommend, even if you're a new player, the best way to start is simply by writing down the lore numbers. So both players will start with 0, either on a pad of paper. The advantage of writing it down is if, it's common that someone might forget exactly what happened, how much lore, just having that history of how the lore changed over time can be very valuable in coming to like an amicable conclusion as to, what amicable conclusion, so that's a hard word,
Yeah.
as to what the correct lore value is. So, all right, so both players, once you decide, again, who starts first, both players will draw 7 cards. Let's go ahead and clear off these fun cards. All right, so both players are going to draw 7 cards. So I like kind of drawing them out like this, just so you're sure that you haven't drawn 8 cards, too many cards. So we'll look at our opening hand. This is actually a pretty good opening hand. So one thing that you want to focus on in your opening hand is make sure that you have enough cards that are inkable, and something that you want to do pretty early. You don't just want to do nothing for the first few turns of the game.
Right.
You want to create a board presence so that you can start challenging or questing. And this is frankly a very good card. We're not going to, or a very good hand, sorry. We're not going to get into some of the specifics of, for instance, if you go first or second might change whether or not I want to fire the cannons in my hand. That's some more advanced strategy that we can go over later. But as I can see right here, I have 6 inkable cards, 1 non-inkable cards. I have 2 different first turn plays. This can be a first turn play, then a second turn play, third turn play. This is a good hand. But
Right.
let's say, I'm not too interested in playing this turn 2, and I'm really want to play Ariel turn 3, so I'm not too interested in playing Mickey turn 3. So now you have a decision, this is really cool in Lorcana. This is not like Magic. In Magic, this is where you would make your mulligan decision, where either you decide to keep your whole hand, or you have to throw the whole thing away. In Lorcana, kind of similar to Hearthstone, you get to pick some of the cards that you want to get rid of, and then draw that many cards.
Oh,
you get to do that
nice.
only once. So let's say I want to get rid of these 2 cards. The technical instructions are that you take those 2 cards, put them on the bottom of your library, then you shuffle your library. So you do have a chance to draw those 2 cards again, even in the second time. So again, I'm going to reshuffle here. I'm not a huge fan of this. I wish they kind of let you put them aside and then draw from the top just to eliminate the shuffling. Because, again, what you're really supposed to do is you shuffle it well, then you present it to your opponent to then cut it. It's just some extra steps that I don't feel are too necessary. So then we'll draw 2 more cards to replace the 2 that we got rid of. And cool, we got 2 more inkable cards. We got a 5-cost Moana, and we got a Tinkerbell. So, again, this is a good hand. And now, when both players have done that, so the starting player makes the mulligan decision first, because again, at high levels of play, it could actually matter if you see your opponent mulligan or, redraw 4 cards.
Right.
Their hand is a little iffy, so maybe you're more conservative in your mulligan decision. But once both players say that they're done, then play begins. All right, Mango, now we're ready to play. We've got our starting hand. And so the starting player, obviously that we determine over, that's the player that goes first. And when you're the starting player, you actually skip your first draw. So that's important. That's kind of, you have a big,
evens it out.
That evens it out, right?
Yeah.
Your opponent still gets to draw on their first turn if they didn't go first. But if you're going first, just to make it a little bit evener, because going first is a little evener, a little bit more fair. The starting player does have a big advantage, so they don't get to draw first. So let's talk about kind of the breakdown of the turn. You have a beginning phase and a main phase. So in the beginning phase, Lorcana calls it, which is pretty cool, they call it ready, set, draw. Which, if you're familiar with Magic, that's the same as untap, upkeep, draw. Very similar.
Yeah.
So the ready phase just means if you have any permanents in play, so be it item, which is items, creatures, and your inkwell, you ready them all. So if they're exerted, you untap them so they can be used again. Then the set, like the upkeep in Magic, that's just where some things can trigger. Some things might say during your ready phase, do something.
Okay. Okay.
So that's really just a trigger phase. And then draw, exactly what it sounds like. You draw your first card on the turn. But again, the starting player on its first turn does not draw the card. Then you go to your main phase. So we're basically, since it's our first turn, the ready, set, draw. The draw doesn't happen. There's nothing to ready. We're just going to go straight to our main phase. Now in the main phase, this is really cool in Lorcana, which again can add to a lot of the strategy in the game. You can take any action in any order during your main phase. So let's talk about what those actions are. So again, you can take any action in any order that you want, and as many actions as you can or want to if you have the resources in order to pay for them. So let's talk about those actions. So playing a card face down in your inkwell, that's the most basic action really that you can take. You can only do this once per turn. You can only play one card face down per turn in your inkwell unless another card says that you can do more. There is one like Bell, for instance, can allow you to do that. And another important thing is that when you play a card face down in your inkwell, you actually need to reveal it to your opponent. The focus of that is that you're proving that it has the wreath, right? So like you can't cheat and say, oh, fire the cannons in the inkwell, because it doesn't have the wreath. So it's important that it does have the wreath. Also, in higher modes of play, actually having the information of what your opponent is putting in your inkwell, that's valuable information. So this is, again...
turn one, you already get to see a color that they're using.
Correct, yes. You get some information about their deck immediately. So that's also a great point. So another interesting side note, again, just for advanced play in Lorcana, the official rules state that you cannot record keep in a game outside of the life total. Or, outside of the lore total in Lorcana. Okay. So you can't just, because in Magic, for instance, note keeping is encouraged at high levels of play to remember things. Whatever. But I think specifically to not slow down the game, you can't just sit there and jot down every card that they put in their inkwell. Again, only a concern for some high-level tournament play, but that's something you are not allowed to do in Lorcana. So again, let's say this first turn, since again I want to play Ariel on 3, or maybe here, I know that I'm not going to play Simba and Stitch both on turn 1. So let's say I reveal Simba, put it face down in my inkwell, and then the next set of actions that I can do is play something. So being that it's my first turn and I only have one ink, obviously what I am playing here is pretty limited. So I only can play things that cost 1. And Fire the Cannons here cost 1, but since I'm going first, there's nothing to target with this. Fire the Cannons deals 2 damage to chosen character, which should obviously be an opponent's character, so they haven't gone yet, they have no character. So on my turn 1, I would play Stitch. So I exert my ink that I played face down, Stitch cost 1, now I have Stitch in play. Very straightforward. Right. Let's actually take a dive deeper though. This is where I was talking where Fire the Cannons is much better if you're not going first, right? So let's say I wasn't going first. My opponent went first and they actually played Stitch. Mm-hmm. Then on my turn, I would play my face down resource, and now I could just immediately remove Stitch by dealing 2 damage to it, right? It can also be good on the second turn if I had another 1-drop. So I know we're getting a bit in the weeds here, but just thinking, Lorcana is not, it's kid friendly, it's a cool game, but it's not overly simple by any means. There's a lot of cool strategy here. So just the fact that I have these 3 1 costs, maybe putting Simba down in my inkwell wasn't the best if I'm going first, right? So let's say since I have 2 3 costs here, Ariel and Tinkerbell, and I prefer to play Ariel because it's a stronger card. It's a super rare. This is a common. So I play Tinkerbell face down on my first turn, again to play Stitch. And the reason I'm doing that is because I know my opponent's likely to play something that's like a 2-2 as well, right? It can only take 2 damage. So then on my second turn, I can draw, and then I can ink something. Let's say I'm, still a ways away from being able to play Moana because it's a 5 cost, so I play it down. And now, whereas before when I played Simba, I would have only been able to fire the cannons, but now since I have 2, I can do 2 things, right?
Oh, right.
Right? Yeah. So I can exert this ink to play Simba, and now I can exert my other ink to also cast Fire the Cannons, targeting maybe they played a Stitch or something similar to a Stitch. This stat line, 1 cost for a 2-2 that taps for 1 lore, there's 1 in every color. Right, so this is like a base card, a standard card, kind of a cornerstone of the game. There's several of them. Fire the Cannons I also consider a cornerstone of the game, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So just right here, in the first 2 turns, we saw what could be a significant difference in the game with a fairly simple decision.
Right.
All right, so now we've shown how you can Exert your resources. Playing a resource for your turn is an action. Exerting your resources to play cards is an action. We showed how you can play 2 cards. We played Simba and Fire the Cannons. So we played 2 cards in one turn because we could pay for each of them, 1 for each. And then when Fire the Cannons resolves, it goes into our discard pile because it's an action. But also one thing we need to touch on is abilities. So Simba, when it comes into play, this is called a triggered ability. So this happens, it'll tell you what it does. It's called Guess What? It has a cool little name. And when you play this character, you may draw a card and then choose and discard a card. So it says may, which is important. That means you don't have to.
Right.
It's your choice.
That's good.
But generally that's something you want to do.
Right.
Because it's more information. You don't have to discard first, because that could be a little iffy. If you like all your cards, you get to draw first. So let's do that. We draw... Ooh, a German Tinkerbell.
It's a very expensive card.
We'll talk... yeah, and it's a cold foil, so it's a fancy one. But I guess this Hans is also German here, too. We'll talk a little bit about the German and English stuff that's going on when we're opening a packs. We would have all English cards, but they're just really hard to get. So, let's see. What I want to keep this, it is inkable. Grab your sword is some removal, but we're kind of ahead right now because we've played 2 things. We've also played a Fire the Cannons, so we probably don't want Grab Your Sword right now because we're almost certainly ahead on board, so we'll discard this. So some other characters or items will actually have abilities where they can exert in order to use the ability. So again, that's another action that you can take, but once a character is exerted, you cannot then exert them again. Once they're exerted, once they're tapped like this, you can't do something else that would require them to exert. And remember that each character has 2 hidden exert abilities. One is to challenge, and the other is to quest. So this is our second turn. We've kind of presumed that we have banished whatever character they played with Fire the Cannon. So there's nothing for Stitch to challenge. They don't have anything. So we can exert Stitch in order to get our first lore. Because it has 1 lore pip, so we've exerted it. Now we have 1 lore. And then once we've taken all the actions that we can, which we have, we've frankly done quite a bit for even just turn 2, then we pass the turn to our opponent. That's very important, especially for players that are new and starting, to announce this. Announce when you're done. Some players will just sit back, when they're content with their turn, but it's always just very polite to say, hey, I'm done, now it's your turn.
Right, just card etiquette.
Yep. Like, let's say we draw another non-inkable card. So let's say we pitch this. We're definitely keeping these 2s because it's 3-4. So we pitch that, or let's say we pitch this, right? If we draw another non-inkable next turn, we have to ink one of these, which is not a positive. We're not thrilled about inking Tinkerbell. And for that argument, maybe it was better the original discussion that we had between Stitch, Simba, and Fire the Cannons. Maybe we should have held Simba because it's more valuable as an ink once we've already played Stitch.
Than just being
a 1-2 and getting that extra decision.
Okay.
See, that's where Lorcana is cool. Like, it has this, like...
Yeah.
That's very rudimentary, right? Seemingly simple, could literally be the difference in the game.
Yeah.
Literally be the difference in the game, how you develop the beginning.
Alright, so if you exert this to get a lore, they can't just cast something like the card you have right here and just kill it immediately?
No, so that's actually a good point, Mango. So, unlike in Magic, there aren't instants in this game yet. So my personal guess will be they'll put something like trap cards that we've seen in some other card games that can activate on your opponent's turn. But right now, when you're taking your turn, you only need to worry about the ordering of your own actions. Your opponent isn't going to interact with it. But there is still a lot of strategy. If people say, oh, the Magic the depth in Magic is the stack, interacting with your opponent during your turn, and that adds to a lot of depth in the game. But just the way that you can order your abilities and the way that you think through that, and then maintaining the tempo between challenging and questing, that's where a lot of the depth in Lorcana is, and it's a lot of fun.
Okay.
All right, Mango, so we've gone over the beginning of the game. Let's go ahead and take 1 turn real quick. We'll untap, which is ready, set. We have nothing that comes with set, and then we'll draw. So we got a frying pan here. And so we could take our next turn, but let's... dink! Let's stop there because we still have an example game coming up. And I want to go over some of the special mechanics and abilities that you'll see on cards, like Shift that we saw on the Tinkerbell, Singer here. We're going to talk over what all those mean. But before we do that, there's one thing that I want to mention that I kind of glossed over previously. when you play a character, this is very similar to Magic. The first turn that you play a character, it cannot exert. You cannot exert it to quest. You cannot exert it to challenge. There's an exception for that we're about to talk about, Rush. But generally, when you play a character, it's your next turn is the first turn that you can exert it.
Okay.
Again, there's some exceptions to that, but that's like in Magic, it's called Summoning Sickness in Magic, or Haste, Counter Summoning Sickness. Lorcana's a little different, and we're going to go over that, but wanted to make that clear. When you play a character, generally it can do nothing until the start of your next turn. But it also can't be
You have
challenged.
to wait for the paint to dry.
You have to wait for the paint to dry. That's exactly correct. The ink.
The ink.
Yes. You have to wait for the ink to dry. That's exactly correct. But also, by that same token, since you play them and they're not exerted, they also can't be challenged. So they have a little bit of protection, right? It's not like you play it and then your opponent just immediately challenges it and banishes it, because it's not exhausting.
You can cast something on it, though, right?
Correct, you can.
Okay.
There's also an exception to that, which is why we're about to go over the special abilities. Awesome. All right, so let's clean this up, and we'll come back to this for our example game. And let's get into some of these cool special abilities. We got, I'm dropping cards.
Pongo. I got you. Okay.
All right, Vega, let's get into the actual special abilities, again, that you'll see very commonly. We got them in order here. I think I got all of them. I'm pretty sure I got all of them. So let's talk about the first one, which is Evasive. So Evasive is an ability that affects the way that challenging works. It's very similar to flying in Magic. And you actually see here in the description, it tells you what it does. Only characters with Evasive can challenge this character.
That's pretty good.
Right? So even when you exert him to either challenge or quest, so Pongo's particularly good at questing because he has 2 lore pips there.
Wow.
He cannot be challenged even when he's exerted unless the challenging character also has Evasive. Now, he can challenge non-evasive characters. That doesn't affect what he can do. He just cannot be challenged unless the character that's challenging him has Evasive. So pretty straightforward, but very good to kind of make your characters a little more safe. So now we have Rafiki that we saw earlier from our general overview. So Rafiki has Rush. This is what I was talking about before that actually changes that rule of whether or not you can exert the turn that you play it. Now it's important, Rush only allows you to challenge the turn you play it. Does not allow you to quest. Right. So you can immediately play him and challenge some character that your opponent has. And the reason this is particularly valuable is since you know that generally characters that are played cannot immediately challenge, a lot of times you'll make questing and challenging decisions based on what you see your opponent could do next turn.
That makes sense.
Right, so Rush can provide additional value in the fact that it's a surprise, that they don't really see that coming. Right, still pretty straightforward though. Next, we have Challenger. So exactly like what it sounds like, these are characters that are really good at challenging. So generally, they'll have an underpowered relative to their cost power, but then when they're challenging, only when they're challenging, they'll get an attack boost of X as our variable, and it'll tell you what X is. So +2. So in this case, this character gets +2 attack when challenging. Maybe they'll have a -1 in the future for a character that's bad at challenging, but is good at defending. But right now, I believe all the challengers are pluses. So Captain Hook is particularly good, which at first I didn't think this card was great. I didn't know how good Challenger was, but we'll go over when we're opening packs later. Hopefully we get one of them, a specific common that's very strong that makes Captain Hook good, particularly. Next, we have Ward. So Ward is kind of the opposite of Evasive. So Ward, and again, we have flavor text here for all, not flavor text, rules text here for everything in parentheses, so you can always refresh your memory. Opponents cannot choose this character except to challenge.
Oh.
So that's worded a little weird, but what that means is that actions and abilities, anything that's not challenging, cannot target this. You can't say, I want to deal damage to Donald Duck with this card or this ability or this item, or even items that say, like we saw earlier real briefly, we had the frying pan, dink. Like frying pan cannot dink him because frying pan says target opposing character cannot attack cannot challenge on the next turn. So you can't target Donald Duck with that because it has Ward, but it can still be challenged. It can still be challenged just like normal. So if a character managed to have Evasive and Ward, they'd be very difficult.
Very hard to deal with.
Yeah, very hard to deal with. So, again, that's Ward, also pretty straightforward. Now we're getting into a little more complexity here, and we actually get both of them on the same. So that's why I like using this card as an example, because here we have both Bodyguard and Support. So Bodyguard is probably the more complex, so let's talk about Support first. So Support just says that when this character quests, during this turn, I can choose another character and add the attack value of this character to that character, just for this turn. So this one's pretty big, right? It has 4 strength, right? Or 4 attack. So when I exert to gain 1 lore when questing, so this is specifically questing, I can't challenge and get the support. It says when the character quests, I can add the attack to, maybe someone small, like Captain Hook, which at that point, right, because Captain Hook's also challenger, so supporting, exerting Maximus to quest, to support, will then make Captain Hook have a base attack of 5, 1 plus 4, and then when Captain Hook challenges, it gets 2 more to go all the way up to 7.
Yeah.
And that's just a 1-cost guy that can hit.
That can kill anything that I've seen.
Yeah, most things, except for the legendary Stitch we saw earlier was a 4/8.
Oh, right.
So yeah, that one's a little bit bigger. All right, so that's support. Again, it's pretty straightforward. Now let's talk about Bodyguard. Bodyguard is really cool and very important in Lorcana. So Bodyguards, when they're exerted, your opponent has to challenge any exerted character with Bodyguard before they can challenge anything else.
Oh, okay.
So it's exactly what it sounds like, right?
Yeah.
You're guarding your other guys. You're the bodyguard for the other guys. Now, the other cool thing about Bodyguard is when you play it, it can't quest and it can't challenge unless it has Rush. However, you can play Bodyguards exerted. They can come into play exerted so that the Bodyguard immediately has an impact.
Okay.
Right? Because the Bodyguard only has an effect if it is exerted. So instead of playing Maximus unexerted, if I want it to immediately Bodyguard, I can play it exerted. And now they have to get through this 5 willpower if they want to
do anything
and challenge any other characters. And if I have more Bodyguard, if you have multiple Bodyguard characters, they can choose which Bodyguard they challenge, but they have to get through all of them still before they can challenge anything else. Also important, a good example, remember that when you play something exerted as a Bodyguard, that does not count as questing or otherwise exerting, so you don't get the support immediately, because the support is only when it quests. Does it give its attack. So Bodyguard is just, again, you can still choose to play it normally, but generally you'll want to play Bodyguards exerted in order for them to function as a Bodyguard. Yeah. So a little more complexity. If you notice, we're increasing complexity as we go down.
Right.
So this one is a bit of a doozy to talk through because it has some pretty cool caveats that gets into a little bit of the higher levels of play here. Let's talk about Shift. Shift is really cool. So Shift, we're going to read here. You may pay 4, so Shift X, where X equals 4 here. You may pay 4 to play this on top of one of your characters named Tinkerbell, which is why we have another Tinkerbell here, right? So normally Tinkerbell would cost 6 resources to play. This Tinkerbell only costs 3. But you can see 3, 4, that's 1 turn into the next, right? So we could play this Tinkerbell on turn 3, and then on turn 4, immediately shift the big Tinkerbell, the giant fairy, onto the tiny tactician version of Tinkerbell. So that's why you have the big version of the name and the little version. The big version of the name is the character that it is, right? The little part of the name is like the variant of that character.
This one's
that it
a
is.
Giant fairy, and this one's a tiny
fairy, right?
Yeah.
So the cool, so that's generally Shift. Is you're going to get a discount on the cost of playing a big card at the added expense of basically using your little card, because this will go on top of it. So it kind of replaces that one when you shift.
Okay.
So it reduces the cost of 2, but you're using an entire card. Your other Tinkerbell that you just played, basically goes away when you play it. So obviously that's cool for various reasons, because you're getting to play a creature or a character earlier. However, there's one really, really cool ramification of this. When you shift a character on top of another character, it's not the same as just playing it new. It does not count as a new character. It's like that character is evolving.
Oh, okay.
So any damage that was on the character stays on it. Like if this Tinkerbell somehow had 2 damage because they targeted it with an action to deal 2 damage, and I shift Tinkerbell on it, on my smaller Tinkerbell, it still keeps the 2 damage. Also, any other status effects. If I exerted the small Tinkerbell first, to quest or challenge or whatever, and then played the big Tinkerbell, let's say it has 2 damage because I challenged, and I played the big Tinkerbell on it, it would also be exerted.
Okay.
Those were kind of negative sides of it, right? Keeping damage, staying exerted. But the best part is it basically gives it super rush. Because you're not playing the character new, you're playing it on a character that already existed.
Oh, wow.
If you play the other character last turn, right?
Right.
That means you can't just only challenge that turn. You can challenge and quest. And so let's actually read what this very good card, the Big Tinkerbell, does. So Shift 4, that's what we're talking about. When you play this character, so this is called a triggered ability. It tells you what happens. When you play this character, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. So that's pretty good.
All right.
But then, during your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may deal 2 damage to target opposing character.
Oh, that's potentially...
That's a blowout.
Yes.
Right? Because imagine you play this Tinkerbell on turn 3, you leave it unexhausted, so it's very unlikely they're going to be able to kill this, right? Because it's not exhausted, they can't challenge it, they'd have to do 4 damage with an action, it's unlikely. Then you play this Tinkerbell on turn 4, you immediately deal 1 damage to everything, but then, since again, it's not the same as playing it new, and this other Tinkerbell was in play last turn, now you can immediately challenge with it to hopefully banish one of their characters, and then this will proc, this trigger will proc, and do it. Yeah. So a lot of damage. So that's why this Tinkerbell is pretty good. And that's why shifting is a little more of an advanced technique and can really lead to the surprise scenarios. It's not just the discount, it's the discount and the surprise.
Right.
And the way you kind of need to think about it is you really need those 2 things working for you because the cost is not cheap. Like you're using an entire one of the cards that you had just played.
Right.
Like it's a good payoff.
I mean, you're using 7.
7, right? So total you paid more and 2 cards.
Yeah, 7 across 2 turns.
Mm-hmm. And another concept that's very common in Magic is called card advantage. So there's tempo and card advantage the big cornerstones of competitive card gaming. And so you kind of want to make sure if you're using 2 cards like this that you're getting 2 cards out of it. And to your point, you spent 3 and 4, that's 7 total ink across 2 turns. That's a lot of tempo being invested into this, but you're probably going to get it out of it.
Right.
This is strong.
It's going to pay you back.
Yeah, this is definitely strong. Oh, another important point that probably should have said earlier. When you challenge with something, both cards do damage. The challenger and the defending card both deal and take damage.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't matter who's initiating the challenge. In both cases, both cards will take damage.
Just head-on collision every time.
Yep. They just attack every time. So anyway, that's challenge. One more important nuance to know, again, a little more advanced about shifting. If something would remove this from play, let's talk in Magic terms, going into a different zone. So generally the zones are your hand, your inkwell, what's in play, and your discard pile, right? If anything would move this either to the discard pile, there's some that would remove it to your hand. There's some that even put it in your inkwell, like your opponent. It's like kind of removal. It can change something that's face up in play into something that's in your inkwell. Mm-hmm. Both cards go to that place. So if they return it to your hand, you get both back to your hand.
Okay.
If they go to your discard, they both go. If they go to your inkwell, they both go. So that's actually even a little additional upside. It's not like the bottom card doesn't exist anymore. It just follows the top one wherever it goes.
Sounds good.
All right, cool. So we got shift. It's a little more complex one. So that's probably about as complex as it gets now, at least for the first set. But my personal favorite and my personal favorite card, if you got any Magic players out there, Wheel of Fortune, incredibly powerful card, has basically the same text as this. But why this could even be better than the very powerful Magic card Wheel of Fortune is the fact that it is a song. So, what is a song? So songs are a special type of action that instead of paying its cost, so this costs 5 and is not inkable, which it better not be because of how strong it is already, So instead of paying 5 ink resources, you can exert a creature that you control that costs 5 or more in order to cast the song for free. So like if we have our, let's say we have our shifted Tinkerbell here, we could exert our Tinkerbell in order to cast this for free, not using any ink resources. But now that's all our Tinkerbell's done, right? It can't challenge, it can't quest anymore because we used its exert. So that's yet really the third hidden exert ability, is the ability to sing a song.
Right.
They're singing, right? So Tinkerbell is singing A Whole New World, a little out of flavor from Aladdin, but it'd be cool to see her do it.
Yeah.
So what does A Whole New World do? Well, each player discards their hand and draw 7 cards. So I'm not going to get too into the weeds of why that's so powerful, but especially casting that for free when you have all your resources available to then do whatever with those 7 cards that you get,
right?
It's just incredibly strong. So another important part about songs is you can't be additive about it. Like you can't have a 3-cost creature, and like exhaust it and 2 ink. Like, you can't add up to 5.
Okay.
It has to be either a 5 or greater cost creature, or character. I'm going to keep messing that up. A 5 or greater cost character, or 5 ink. It's either or. It's not a combination of both. There is an exception, though, which is our segue for what's better at singing songs than good singers. So, Cinderella, or my personal favorite, Ariel, which is what my competitive deck here is built around. They're good singers. They're known for singing. So singer means that you can cast songs that exceed what your cost is. And it will tell you how much higher it can go. So this Cinderella, for instance, is a 4 cost. So it could normally only cost songs that go up to 4, but it has singer 5. Which means, and it tells you again in parentheses, this character counts as cost 5, but only to sing songs. So it specifically works with A Whole New World. Ariel, the one that this deck is built around, costs 3, and it can exhaust. It also has singer 5, so it can also exhaust. So that's a 2 increase.
Yeah.
Let me actually pull out Ariel, because this is my favorite card with A Whole New World. Just putting the PSA out there, Ariel is a very good card that I think will only get better in Lorcana as more songs are printed.
PSA, everyone!
Yeah. Ariel is good. So Ariel is a 3 cost and inkable. Good, so she's flexible. A 2/3. So we're going to talk about under or over costed. So let's just touch on that briefly. Terminology and TCGs, whenever you have your power and your toughness, or in Lorcana, your strength or your willpower, equal to your cost, that's considered even vanilla stats. You're even costed, you're a 3/3 for 3. So a 2/3 for 3 is a little below. As we saw in Lorcana, it's a little more boosted than that, at least at the high end. Like we saw the 2/2 for 1.
Right.
It's something that every color has. So maybe a 4/4 for 3 is more like vanilla even. But so this is definitely undercost, or it's underpowered for that, right?
Yeah.
So it better have something else, especially considering it's a super rare that makes it better. So Singer 5, already good. Batting 2 above their cost to cast actions.
Yeah.
And especially as we saw briefly, the Grab Your Sword sort of board wipe that we had earlier, the removal, that was a 5-cost song. This is a 5-cost song, so Singer 5 is very important. Let's say musical debut. So this is the most singer-focused card. Ariel is an amazing singer in The Little Mermaid. So when you play this character, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may reveal a song card and put it into your hand.
Oh, wow.
So not only is Ariel great at singing, she gets the songs.
Right.
She gets, and very strong songs.
Right.
Like this. So similar to attacking and evasive, similar to attacking and evasive, what am I saying? Similar to challenger and questing, you cannot exert to sing a song if you just played the character this turn.
Right.
So it's just any exertion. You cannot exert a character when you just played it, because that would be ridiculous, right? If you could play Ariel, get A Whole New World, and then exert Ariel to cast A Whole New World.
Yeah.
It's already good enough. So anyway, that's all the mechanics I believe that we have currently. Again, some of them are pretty simple, some increasing complexity. We went over some of the edge cases where you can get that complexity, which maybe was better for the future video, but I think that's a great place. So now we can actually get started with our first demo game.
I'm so excited.
All right, let's go. Good. That was good. Getting better, right? Like that was a long one and was pretty smooth. We have a card.
Oh, so you're literally like telling the rules of Lorcana.
Yeah.
Okay.
A whole how to play.
Okay.
Alright. 3, 2, 1. Alright, man. You ready? You ready? I looked at you and you were doing this.
Alright.
Alright, you good? Right. It'll take us a little bit to get into it.
Alright.
2, 1. You need to start by looking at the...
You're right.
Yeah, you can't start looking down. We just have to feel out how that works. Alright, so let's start again from the beginning. So many hugs.
So many hugs.
Alright, Jacob.
Alrighty. You know my name!
Alright, Mango, let's get started digging into Lorcana. There is one card from every color, and also one card from every type, or even 2 cards from every type. So let's see if we can get the colors off the top of the head. Alright, blue. Yeah, okay. Blue is sapphire. Green is emerald. There you go.
Ruby. Amethyst?
No. That's the one that gets...
This is amethyst.
Yeah.
This is amber.
Yep. Yellow is
amethyst.
amber.
And
amethyst
steel.
Steel. There you go.
The easiest one for me to remember.
Yeah. For some reason.
Yeah.
Although it's not a color. The other ones are like gems that embody colors. This is steel.
Yeah.
Steel's great. I don't know. It's easy.
We didn't play those terrible Sega games.
What? What Sega games?
About Sonic the Hedgehog. We're like going for the emeralds and the rubies and stuff.
Oh, but you were segueing from steel.
Yeah, but it's actually Pokemon.
Okay. No, you're fine. You're fine.
Sega. Segway.
Okay. Text down here at the bottom, which is fun to read but has no actually impact on the game. So this one from Flynn Rider is, once upon a time, a single drop of sunlight fell from the heavens. That's probably not Flynn Rider's voice.
No, it's not.
I have no idea what Flynn Rider... Oh boy! Magic golden flower! Oh god! He's got a sword! That's the voice I should do for everything. Alright kids! He's got a sword! Alright kids, let's go over the rules of Lorcana. First, this is an item, followed by... This is magic golden flower. Oh god, Jumba Jukaba, now he's got a sword. What do we do, kids?
In your hand. Because I want to say something other than let's go.
What are you going to say?
Yeah.
No, you're not.
I was about to cough.
All been in frame.
Look, a zipper boner.
Oh, these have not really been too much in frame. We'll just leave this. We've done enough. We had a successful video.
Yeah.
We have the studio.
Can I get another hug?
We have the video.
Yay.